The information provided by Trading Forex Price Action to you does not constitute personal financial advice. The information provided is of a general nature only and does not take into account your individual objectives, financial situation, or needs. It should not be used, relied upon, or treated as a substitute for specific professional advice.
Hey guys, this is the weekly forecast for May 30th through June 3rd of 2022. Okay, just a heads up, the Euro Yen, the Euro Dollar, and the Aussie Yen will not be on this forecast, for previous forecast analysis is still up to date. Okay, so let's start with the dollar CAD pair.
Okay, this is a monthly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So since there was normal long strength confirmed in this point right here, from this trendline breakout from this pivot to this pivot right here, with a breakout and immediate break back in, creating normal long strength. And since price is ranging about for the last couple of months, which is a common way that price often falls right back down to that pivot low right here to create strong short strength. And so in the long term, I'm short bias right back down to this pivot low right here. And moreover on the daily and the weekly chart, since there are short trades that formed in this area that are stronger than the long trades that formed right here. In the short term, I'm also short biased right back down to this pivot low right here. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, this is the daily chart. Let me run you by the current setup I'm looking at. So recall the last daily long trade that formed was right here, and the last daily short trade that formed was right here. Now this short trade was slightly stronger than this long trade, so the daily bias was short, or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. And moreover, we were getting lower time frame confirmation of this daily short bias, all in these areas right here. However, I did not take this short entry because I did not get enough of a pullback to entice me to take a short entry with a stop loss at this pivot high. Now, moreover, this week, there was actually a new weekly bias that formed also. So let's go ahead and look at that. Let's go over to the weekly chart. Okay, so on this weekly chart, the last long trade that formed was right here. And the last short trade that formed was this week. And it's right here. Now, since a weekly bias has formed at this point, that daily bias that I just mentioned is now irrelevant because there's a higher time frame bias that just formed this week. And so therefore, the lower time frame confirmations are reset also. Okay, so we'll look at the lower confirmations too, but before that, let me just show you what the price elements are that are providing long strength for this long trade, and the price elements that are providing short strength for this short trade. So let's go over to the monthly chart. Okay, so on this monthly chart, that weekly short trade formed at this area right here, and that weekly long trade formed in this area right here. Now, in terms of short strength, first of all, there's a couple gaps here. So there's a small one right here, a miniature one right here, and more of another small one right here, all which provide short strength to this short trade. Now, moreover, we also have a monthly legitimate trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here, right? Because it's more than 3 touches, so it's legitimate. So this also provides short strength. Okay, but you also want to remember this small gap right here is actually providing long strength to this short trade. So in other words, you have to subtract this long strength from the short strength created by all these elements right here. Okay, so now let's look at the long strength. Okay, so in terms of long strength, we have this small gap right here that provides long strength. And there are no legitimate trend lines that provide long strength in this case. However, again, there was a small gap at this level right here that was actually providing short strength to this long trade. So again, you have to subtract the strength of this short strength from the long strength. All right, so going strictly from that weekly bias, there seems to be more short strength than long strength. Okay, but like always, the lower time frame confirmations have the ultimate say in terms of higher time frame biases. So let's go ahead and see what's happening there. Let's go over to the 4-hour chart. Okay, so on this 4-hour chart, there was strong short strength confirmed last week, right at this point right here, and that's from this trend line, from this pivot to this pivot right here, with a breakout and immediate break back in. However, price coming right back down to stop out that pivot low, creating strong short strength. However, that said, since the weekly bias was just formed on this close of this Friday's candle right here, at this point, this strong short strength is irrelevant. So I'm going to need another lower confirmation to form so I could confirm that weekly short bias. So here's some trend lines I'm looking at. Let me just get rid of these. All right, so the one trend line is from this pivot to this pivot right here. And the other one is from this pivot to this pivot right here. Now, if price could come up to one of these trend lines and break it out and immediately break back in, that'll show normal short strength. However, price could come right back up to that pivot high. That will create strong long strength. And simultaneously, if we could get a V-shaped recovery on the lower time frames from the 1 minute to the 15-minute chart, well, that will show extreme short strength, and thus will confirm that weekly short bias. However, recall on this pair, I cannot take any mid-row short entries, so even if this extreme short strength does confirm that weekly short bias, I'm going to need a nice pullback right up to the 29.70 levels for a short entry, for the stop losses at this pivot high. So that's about 100 pip stop loss. Okay, so I'll keep you guys updated with what happens on this one on the midweek analysis. Okay, so let's go on to the pound yen. Okay, and if you're having trouble understanding what I'm talking about in terms of weekly biases and lower confirmations, please watch my price action trading course. For that course is designed to provide you the necessary information so you can understand how to trade price action. Okay, this is a monthly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So back in January 2021, there was strong long strength confirmed from this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. As you can see, there was a breakout and immediate break back in, showing normal short strength. However, price came right back up to that pivot high to create strong monthly long strength. Now, although price has already moved a significant distance since this strong long strength was confirmed, I still think there's a little bit more steam in this long run. So in the long term, for the time being, I'm long biased right back up to this pivot high right here. And moreover, on the weekly chart, since there was a weak short trade that formed and a slightly stronger long trade that formed right here. And so in the short term, I'm also long biased right back up to this pivot high right here. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, this is a weekly chart. Let me run you by what's been happening on this pair for the last couple of months. So in January of this year, there was a weak short trade that formed right here. And then the following week, there was actually a strong long trade that formed right here. And so the weekly bias was long, or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. And now moreover, like I showed you on the overview, there was strong monthly long strength on this pair also. So this was a great trade to extend past this main target right here to extension levels. Okay, and as price rose all the way up to these levels right here, a couple of weeks back, there was actually another short trade that formed right here. And last week, there was a long trade that formed right here. So let me go ahead and show you the price elements that are providing short strength for the short trade and long strength for this long trade. So let's go over to the monthly chart. Okay, so on this monthly chart, that weekly short trade formed right here, and that long trade formed at this pivot right here. Now, in terms of short strength for this short trade, there was this mini gap that formed right here, and moreover, a small gap that formed right here, both providing short strength for that short trade. And moreover, there was a trend line that runs right through this level right here that shows short strength also. So let me go ahead and show you that. Let me zoom out. Okay, so that trend line is from this pivot to this pivot right here. And there's 3 touches on it, so it's legitimate. 1, 2, and 3 right here. Okay, so this monthly trend line is also providing short strength for that short trade. Okay, so let me zoom back in. All right, so in terms of long strength, we have a mini gap right here. And we have a small gap right here, both providing long strength for that long trade. If you go strictly from the strength on this monthly chart, there seems to be slightly more short strength than long strength, especially because of this trend line right here that's providing short strength. However, that said, you want to recall that there was strong monthly long strength formed right here from this trend line breakout from this pivot to this pivot right here. that I showed you earlier on the overview. So keeping this in mind and seeing that although price has moved a significant distance since this strong long strength formed, I think there's still a little bit more long strength provided by this long strength formed right here. So putting this into the equation, in my opinion, I think there's ever so slightly more long strength than short strength on that weekly bias. Alright, but like always, the lower confirmations have the ultimate say in terms of biases. So let's go ahead and see what's happening there. Let's go over to the 4-hour chart. Okay, so on this 4-hour chart, there's actually a possible strong long strength about to form. And that's from this trend line, from this pivot to this pivot right here. So last week, there was a breakout, an immediate break back in, showing normal short strength. And at this point, price came right back up and is about to touch that pivot high where that normal short strength was created to create strong long strength. Now, if this forms, I will be taking a long entry in the mid-road style. So the stop loss will be at this pivot low right here. However, since the pound yen has a huge pip count, I'm going to need a nice pullback to the 158.80 levels for a long entry in this case with a stop loss at this pivot low. So making that about 100 pip stop loss. Again, with the main target at higher levels way above on that weekly bias. But like I explained earlier, since there's only slightly more long strength on that weekly bias, here's how I'm going to be managing this trade. So let me get rid of these and zoom out. Okay, so first of all, try drawing this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. Now at this point right here with the breakout and an immediate break back in, there was already normal long strength created about a week ago. So with this in mind, if price does come up to this pivot high to make strong long strength for a long entry, and moreover, if price does pull back to the 158.80 levels for about 100 pip stop loss, with the stop loss level being right here, there is a possibility that price does not turn and price goes straight down to this pivot low to make strong short strength and thus confirming a weekly short bias. Okay, so what I'll be watching for is that, let's say if price comes down here and I get that pullback for a long entry and price starts going up, if anything that resembles a hammer on this 4-hour or daily chart. And so what I mean by resembles a hammer is that obviously if it's an obvious hammer like this, in that case, I would abort this long entry. But in this case, since there's only slightly more long strength on that weekly bias, I will abort this long entry with anything that resembles a hammer on this 4-hour daily chart. So the way to remember this is that the body does not have to be small like a traditional hammer. However, if there's a very high wick showing a strong rejection at higher levels, in this case, I will use this to abort this long entry. Okay, and moreover, if price comes up to make that strong long strength, and on the pivot before the pullback for the long entry, if we get anything that resembles a hammer on this 4-hour daily chart, in that case, I will not enter this long trade to begin with. Okay, so I'll keep you guys updated with this one on the midweek analysis also. Alright, so let's go on to the pound dollar. Okay, this is a monthly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So since this horizontal trend line right here, that's attached to this pivot right here, just became legitimate with its 3 touches at 1, 2, and 3 right here. And since price has the tendency to want to test strong levels in the long term, I'm long biased right back up to this pivot high right here. And moreover, since there was strong long strength confirmed from the breakout and immediate break back in right here on this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. And that strong long strength formed when price came right back up to that pivot high right here where that break back in formed to create strong long strength. And although price did break back in to this trend line right here, there's actually another trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here, in which this breakout and immediate break back in also formed. And this trend line is not broken out yet. In the medium term, I'm also long biased right back up to this pivot high right here. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, this is a weekly chart. Let me run you by what's been happening on this pair for the last couple of months. So back in September of 2021, there was a strong short trade that formed. And then a couple of weeks later, there was a weak long trade that formed. And this short trade was stronger than this long trade, so the weekly bias was short. Or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. and that main target was hit right here. And then 2 weeks later, there was actually a strong long trade that formed, which was stronger than this previous short trade right here. And so at this point, this weekly bias became long, or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. And then as price came all the way up to these levels, just short of that main target right here, there was actually another weekly short trade that formed, which was again weaker than this previous long trade. So the bias remained long. However, now price is likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. However, as price ranged for the next couple of weeks, right at this point right here, there was a new monthly trend line that ran right through these levels right here, which is a setup that creates strong short strength. And so at this point, the bias became short, or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. And that main target was hit right here. However, there was no long strength on lower time frames that formed, so price continued down all the way here, where there was a weak long trade that formed right here, keeping the weekly bias short, or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high, and that main target was hit right here. And then we got this strong fall all the way down to these levels. And then last week, there was actually a new long trade that formed right here, which for the time being seems to be stronger than the last weekly short trade that formed right here. Alright, so let me show you the price elements that are providing long strength for this long trade and short strength for this short trade right here. Let's go over to the monthly chart. Alright, so on this monthly chart, that last short trade formed at this pivot right here, while the last long trade that formed was right here. Now in terms of long strength, we had this miniature gap right here, and more of this small gap that formed right here, both providing long strength, and more of this legitimate trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. That's also providing long strength. Now in terms of that short trade, all there was this miniature gap right here providing short strength. However, recall, like I showed you earlier, there was a new monthly trend line that runs right through these levels that provided short strength. And when this type of setup forms, when price ranges about for weeks and creates a new legitimate monthly trend line, that creates a lot of short strength. Okay, so you have to take into consideration this short strength also for this short trade. Alright, so looking at the strength differential, strictly from the elements I just explained, it seems that this short trade and this long trade are pretty much equal in strength, or there's not much difference. Okay, so I'm also considering other factors too. So like I showed you on the overview, there was monthly strong long strength created at this price level right here, from this trend line, from this pivot to this pivot right here. Well, there's a breakout, immediate break back in. However, price came right back up to that pivot high, creating strong long strength. Okay, so this strong long strength also has to be added to this long strength for this long trade right here. Now it goes even further. Recall in previous forecast that I was mentioning there was a fake weekly double top that formed right here, which actually went its target height. And this provides weekly strong short strength. Okay, so you got to add this short strength to this short trade also. So obviously the pound dollar is very complicated at this point, but ultimately, in my opinion, for the time being, there seems to be a slightly more long strength. So in other words, their weekly bias is long, and price is likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. However, like always, I have to watch the lower time frame confirmations to confirm this long bias. So let me show you what I'll be looking for lower confirmation. So let's go over to the 4-hour chart. Okay, so on this 4-hour chart, there was strong long strength confirmed already, with this breakout and immediate break back in. However, price coming right back up to that pivot high to make strong long strength. And that's from this trend line, from this pivot to this pivot right here. Okay, so for the time being, this 4-hour chart is confirming a weekly long bias. So if all things remain equal and there's no further strong short strength confirmed, and if price pulls all the way back down to these levels right here, to roughly the 1.2250 levels right here, I will be taking a long entry with a stop loss at this pivot low, which will make it about 100 pip stop loss. Okay, but that said, I'm also watching this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. So if price comes down and breaks it out, immediate breaks back in. However, if price comes right back down to that pivot low, that will create strong short strength In this case, I will not be taking this long entry. Okay, so either way, I need price to pull way back down to these levels right here, around the 2250 levels, for me to take an entry anyway. So this setup will likely take a while to form. Okay, but I'll keep you guys updated with this one also on the midweek analysis.
Okay, so that's it for the weekly forecast. As I've been showing on my forecast, most major pairs are forming weekly biases, which are going to be the catalyst for that next big move I was talking about. Now, when there's so many pairs that are forming trades simultaneously, it's important at this juncture to begin picking the trades that you want to trade, because we only have a limited amount of resources in terms of margin and account size. And you don't want to find yourself using all your margin on the first setup that forms, only to find there are better setups later in terms of risk reward, but you can't enter them because all your margin is used up. Okay, so just remember that now is the time to begin looking at these setups in terms of risk and reward, and begin to choose the setups that you're going to take again before the setups take place. Alright, so I hope you guys have a great week, and thanks for watching, guys. Goodbye.